The chairman, ladies and gentlemen, the Riley story. This is the story of a family who, over roughly 400 years, starting in Queen Elizabeth I's reign as woolen weavers, continually adapted their products to meet the changing economic environment. So woolen weavers to silk weavers to butchers, and then ribbon weavers, ribbon trimmers, bicycles, motorbicycles, tri-cars, detachable wire wheels, and finally cars. And before I go into this story, I have a question for all of you. Is there anyone here tonight who may have been told by a parent, or more likely a grandparent, of the situation on our roads in 1896? I just thought there might be somebody. That's not. I'm in a good position because my father was born in 1876, and so he used to tell me about 1896. Hardly a car on the road, perhaps a few Daimlers, a lot of French cars. They were ahead of us then, like Volets and the Dions and so on. The speed limit was 4 miles an hour, and the vehicle had to be preceded by a man carrying a red flag. Now just picture you were in a pony and trap, and you come down the bend, and you meet this weird contraption, and a man walking in front with a red flag. You might have thought, what on earth am I seeing? But that was the position in 1896. I'm going to start in 1851, when my grandfather, William Riley Jr., was born. He had 5 sons. His father, William Riley Sr., ran the weaving business, which was only about 100 yards from Coventry Canal Basin. And he was thinking, well, I won't have to take over for quite a while. But Grandfather Senior, very crafty, he decided that his son had got something that he hadn't got. And so in 1870, when William Jr. was only 19, he handed the weaving business to him. And William Riley, they say you need a bit of luck in business. He had a stroke of good fortune, in fact, originated from wartime. The Franco-Prussian War started in 1870. All continental imports stopped. And so William had 2 or 3 years of no competition, because there was a great difference on the continent. I won't say they were mass producing, they weren't, but there was more volume than the Coventry craftsman, who took enormous pride in what he did. It took quite a long time, whereas the continent would have been quicker. And so they revelled in that period where there were no imports. But of course, after the war, back came the imports, and life got tougher and tougher. And William Jr. started to worry. But his neighbour was a name you would have heard of, Sturmey, of Sturmey Archer, bicycle transmission, famous. And William said to him one day, I've got 5 sons, weaving's not going to sustain them. What do I do? And Sturmey said, you get into bicycles immediately. There is the biggest boom coming that Coventry's ever seen. So, and of course, Sturmey then went on to become the first editor of Autocar, the weekly magazine that started in 1895 and is still going strong today. So William started to look at bicycles, still carrying on the weaving business. William was in St Nicholas Street, the weaving, and in King Street, which runs into Nicholas Street, the Coventry Ring Road has sort of swept them away now. But he saw a company called Bonnick, who were making a very, very good sized bicycle. And Warwickshire got an order from America for 3,000 bicycles, which they delivered, but they couldn't get paid. They sued the importer, won the case in the American court, still couldn't get paid. And so they were brought into dire straits. A heavily discounted price, stroke of good fortune. Prior to that, when he took over the weaving business, he did something else, which you will all say, well, that's obvious. What's a great plus? But custom and practice and tradition, things tend to go on and changes put off. And what he did, the Riley weavers in the outlying villages, Polesill, Bedworth, Exhill, so on, they used to bring their work in on a Friday or Saturday, and they'd be paid, and then it was across the road to the Admiral Codrington, which is still there today, no longer a pub, and then they'd come back on a Monday morning for their raw material for the next week's work. So William decided, well, why don't I give them their raw material when they come in on a Friday or Saturday, which he did. The women were absolutely over the moon because they only had one drunken night to contend with instead of two. So that got underway. I guess William, my grandfather, made a significant productivity gain. We hear a lot about today. Countries' productivity is not increasing. And I'm sure William did well out of that deal. He takes over Bonnick. He had 5 sons, and that was in 1890, and he let the name continue. And then in 1896, he formed the Riley Cycle Company Limited and took Bonnick in, and the name Bonnick went superseded by Riley, and Riley Bicycles got off with the employees from Bonnick contributing, got off to a good start. Then at the same time as all this is going on, the third son, Percy Riley, was the inventive genius. Very good at maths at school, but no formal education after that. And he used to go down to Coventry Library every evening. This will amaze you. Coventry Library in those days was open until 9 o'clock at night. And he'd read up everything he could on what Benz was doing in Germany. And then came an evening, my father generally went with him. He turned to my father and he said, I think I can make a car. And my father said, well, go on and make one. Well, is there any point? Because father thinks the internal combustion engine is dirty, smelly. He wants nothing to do with it. So what would I do? Father said, you leave father to me. And then he said, I'm not old enough to buy anything. I'm only 16. The father said, well, give me a list and I'll buy it for you. I'm old enough to sign a purchase contract. So away Percy went, working long hours in the Riley Cycle 2 room, often alone at weekends. And 2 years later, he finished the car. He said to my father, what do we do now? Father said, we go to Stratford-upon-Avon and back quicker than any bicycle. The speed limit, I should point out, had gone up from 4 miles an hour to 14 miles an hour. But they did the journey. Car went very well, no problems. But they go to their father and say, we suggest you stop making bicycles and you make cars. Grandfather said, I can't do that. I've spent every penny I've got on bicycle production. I can't just scrap it all. No, no. Forget about the smelly, dirty engine. and just stay with me making bicycles. Pony and trap and the bicycle are all we need. We don't need anything else. Anyway, my father, Alan the second and Percy were devastated by this, so they went to their mother, who had £39 in the post office savings account. That was a lot of money in those days. And she gave them the £39, and they found a shed in the lee of Cook Street gate. Part of the gate still there today, the shed's long gone. And so they left Percy to start making engines in the shed. And they worked for their father making bicycles and gave Percy part of their wages to fund him. And then a few months later, Percy turns up with the cycle tool, says to his father, "Why don't you put my engine on your bicycle? We've got a motor bicycle." So grandfather wasn't at all keen, but of course he was faced with his wife and these three elder sons, the 5 sons he had, and he had to give way. So we had the Riley motorbike, which did quite well, won a few races. But Percy's fertile mind was already moving on, and he added a third wheel until we had the Riley tricar. My father took that all over the country at weekends, either in a promenade sprint or a hill climb, and swept the board again and again against much bigger engines cars. The big battle most weekends was Riley versus Lagonda. And there was a gentleman called Mr. Gunn, who was head of Lagonda, and the battles he had with my father were numerous and well reported. And so then one day my father was descending into Rugeley, and a wheel came off the tricar, and he crashed into a sweet shop, and before he became unconscious, he told me, all I can remember is chocolates and toffees skating down all over me. When I came to, there was a pot of tea and a piece of cake, and the lady was waiting for me to come round, so I gave her a £5 note. She declined, wouldn't take a penny, but that made Percy think, I've got to add a fourth wheel, Dick, before you kill yourself. So the fourth wheel was added, and in 1906, we had a Riley 9, first of many, and that was a very successful car. And then things got underway in terms of car production. Grandfather was still sort of against it. He never learned to drive. It was 10 years before my father got him into a local car, and that was the back seat. But anyway, he lived on to see a lot of progress. And really, nothing much happened then until we get First World War, and the Riley were making munitions. And then came something that was to have enormous beneficial consequences. The Board of Trade approached my father and said there was a factory out of First Wholesale, Durbar Avenue, and would you like to take that and make, on the understanding, we made munitions. That was probably about 1916. My father said yes, thinking that after the war, he'd have a plant to make cars. And because Nicholas Street was really a sort of pretty miserable hole, really, not suitable for making a car. It's all right making a bicycle. And so after World War I, the factory went into side valve production. A model that was very successful. And some of the owners went to Brooklands. The circuit had been built in 1907 and started to do well. And that was really Riley's entry into motorsport. But at the same time as this, Percy, the inventor genius, and Stanley, fourth son, who was the chassis and body expert, they began drawing and redrawing, discussing, and eventually they came up with what became world famous, the Riley 9, an Arco model, and they built a prototype in 1924, showed it to grandfather, who absolutely almost traumatized them, created a walking stick out of it. You're ridiculous. And so this prototype lay in the shops till 1926. I mean, when I think that model could have been like 2 years earlier. Anyway, in 1925, the Riley Motor Club was formed. And at the end of the 1925 London Edinburgh, which was an annual event held by the Motorcycling Club, and they allowed cars in eventually, and the Riley directors would go up to Edinburgh and have a dinner for all the Rileys that made it in Raleigh. And 1925 was an incredible year. Rileys entered 20, 18 made it to Edinburgh, 16 got gold medals, the other 2 got silver medals. So there was a very packed dinner that night in Edinburgh. And one of the drivers got up at the end of the dinner and proposed the formation of a Riley Motor Club. I think it was the second one-make car club before. I think Jowie beat Riley by about 2 weeks. And that was formed. Grandfather was made president, father chairman, and that grew to become the largest one-make car club in the world until MG overtook it soon after World War II. So we got this position, and the Riley Motor Club started holding events. Riley's always worked Saturday mornings, and one Saturday morning in 1926, Stanley said to my father, "I'm going down to Cheddar Gorge, where there's a Riley Motor Club rally. What car should I take?" And my father said, "Take the 9 prototype." Stanley said, "But what's the point? You know, father's view of it. Do as I say, Stanley, take the Riley prototype." Well, it's obvious looking back, my father had a ploy. And when I was a boy, Stanley used to tell me this story. He said, "I can't swear to it, but you know, when I walked away, I thought your father had just maybe a slight smile on his face, but it was gone so quickly I couldn't be sure. But I thought my brother's up to something." Anyway, I took the 9 prototype down to Cheddar Gorge, entered the field, and saw a huge gathering in one corner with dealers, a growing number of members. So I parked as far away as I could. Because I thought, "Oh God, I don't want interest in this, otherwise it's going to be embarrassing." But while I ran to a Riley dealer in Croydon, saw him enter the field, came galloping over and said, "Stanley, what have you got here?" And he said, "Oh, it's nothing. Don't tell me it's nothing. I've never seen anything like it." I ought to point out in Tony Robb's book, some of you may have read Horseless Carriage, it's described as the greatest night cars line the world had ever seen. So it was bound to attract a lot of attention. Anyway, all the dealers were open looking at it. And Monday morning, my father's phone never stopped ringing all morning. Some dealers quite angry that they haven't been kept in the picture, wanting to know when it was going to be announced and what it would cost. So father said to his father, "This toy car, I think it was more than a toy car, you better call a board meeting quickly. We got a problem." So the board meeting was called, and by one vote, the decision was made to go ahead with the Riley 9. And but then came the agony. Sidebow doing well, was filling the works capacity. How did we get this brand new car into production? So my father headhunted Captain Ridley from Daimler gave him the job of rejigging the whole factory, phasing out the side valve, and getting the Riley 9 into production, which he did extremely successfully. But it was 2 years before they caught up with the orders pouring in. And we then moved into the decade of the 1930s, when it's like a romance. This Brooklands model, which was brought about by Parry Thomas, who had taken the world landscape record on the Pendine Sand, and Malcolm Campbell beat him, took it, and then Parry Thomas was on the point of trying to take it back on the lands, but sadly, that attempt, he was killed. But he'd said to my father, as soon as he looked at the engine, do you realise this engine, you could do so much more with, you could have a racing engine. And my father said, well, okay, you do it. And of course, Parry Thomas had a little workshop on the edge of the Brooklands circuit, where he had a little drawing office and machine shop. But when he was killed, Reed Railton, who had been looking over his shoulder, said to my father, I can finish off the drawings and make the prototype. So my father gave him the go-ahead, and the prototype was finished. Reed Railton took it to the Brooklands circuit, and in his first race, he won just under 100 miles an hour. Well, the world was utterly astonished that this tiny car, tiny engine, could do something. So Reed Railton then built 3 prototypes, which formed the first Riley racing team. And then, as they get more and more into motorsport, production moved to Riley Coventry, production carried on. There's another delightful story. Ken Peacock, who was one of the Riley racing team, he was leading his class at Brooklands in the Riley Brooklands model. And in those days, you had to have a motor mechanic alongside you. And heard a bit of a noise, and they decided it was the number plate coming loose. They agonized, what do we do? Do we run the risk win our class, but then get disqualified by scrutineering after the race? Or do we go into the pits, get the number plate secured, lose our lead class, and do we have enough time to regain the lead? Well, in the end, the motor mechanic, he inched his way down the bonnet, and Ken Peacock was holding one of his ankles with his left hand, holding the steering wheel with his right hand, 70 to 80 miles an hour. The mechanic fixed the number plate, inched his way back, but I immediately thought, when I thought about this story in later life, you know, what would Lewis Hamilton have done in a situation? But and then we moved into the 30s, and it was just nothing short of romance. They won race after race. I mean, Dudley Froy, he drove a Riley Brooklands model over to the Nürburgring, which you'll know has 170 bends. And he entered this Brooklands model, one of the German Grand Prix. The Germans just could not believe it. They had these monstrous machines, and this tiny little thing coming over from England, driven there, driven back to the works, till it takes their breath away. And then, 1932, you've got TT, Cyril Whitcomb wins in a Riley Brooklands model. That was the first of 3 TT victories. Only Jaguar's done 3. No other name has approached that. And you had Monte Carlo Rally, the Alpine Rally, and so on. But I suppose the pinnacle of the 30s success has got to be Le Mans 1934. Riley Coventry entered the second Rileys, and this has never been done before or since in 100 years history of Le Mans. The 6 cars were driven to Le Mans, entered all finished, and drove back to Coventry. And when I checked up at the Le Mans Museum, when I was out in the retro in the pits for a Riley Sprite entry, I went there and they said, I don't expect anyone would ever achieve that again. It was a remarkable situation. And they would have come first, but Nuvolari, who was in the lead on the last lap, he had a fuel leak. He had a bit of chewing gum in his cockpit, and he stuck that in the hole, stopped the lead, and just got across the finish before running out of petrol. If there'd been another lap, Riley's would have been first and second instead of second and third. But and this was the race where my mother made her debut in a race. The Riley management were aghast when this lady was chosen by Rupert Riley, who was the Riley racing team manager. But he'd spotted her doing well in rally after rally. He thought she had it in her, and so she put her in the team. She got off to a terrible start. As you know, the flag drops at 4 o'clock Saturday, you run across the tarmac, jump in the car, and off you go. And because my father hadn't arrived, she was very upset, I suppose distracted, jumps in the car, closes the door on our fingers. So for the first hour, she's got blood everywhere, she's in a terrible state of pain, blood all over the cockpit. And at the end of the first hour, she's 43rd and last, comes into the pits, and clean her up, give her new gloves and new shoes, and then suddenly my father arrives from Coventry, gives her a frig of white head up, and off she goes. As dusk fell, 4 or 5 hours later, she's up from 43rd to 13th, and the riding bits are saying, stay where you are, no further racing, just sit there now. And I was a boy growing up, she said to me, I was hopping back, and I think it could have gone higher, but I had to do what the pits said, but I was always disappointed. And anyway, so they finished 2nd, 3rd, 5th, 9th, 11th, and another 13th. The car that was 5th was a Riley Brooklands model, and that won the Riley, the Rutworth Trophy. And I think the Riley Brooklands statistics, with what they told me in the museum, still stand to this day. Rutworth was a very complicated formula: distance travelled, miles per hour, fuel consumed, and very, very complicated. And it's working out. But anyway, Riley's won it on the day 4. And of course, they won the 1 litre class, the 1.5 litre class, team prize. They won just about every trophy except the outright win. So then we move on. And then 1938, Riley's, and I never quite understood what happened, because at my father's funeral in 1950, a lot of his friends said to me, we should never have gone in with Nuffield. What was your father thinking of it? There was no need for it. But Nuffield and my father were at a dinner at Stratford-upon-Avon, the Warren Hotel, one night in 38, and they were going to stay in the night, and going up to bed, they stopped halfway up the stairs, and Nuffield said to my father, why don't you come under my financial umbrella? You could have design, production, sales, but you've got my financial umbrella. But other than that, you've got total independence to carry on as you are. And they shook hands on the stairs. I think maybe my father, who nearly died the previous year from a duodenal ulcer that burst, I think that might be the reason why he gave in. perhaps with a wife and two small children, he thought that perhaps he didn't want to leave his wife because there was a sort of 40 age difference in their ages. So he might just have been concerned about that. And so they went to Nuffield, and then the war came, and Rileys were very sought after. Rolls-Royce were looking sort of shadow businesses, and they went all over the country. Finally came to Rileys. They said, "You're the first company we've been to that's got the same tolerances as we have." And so they got Merlin parts made at Rileys. And then came other orders like the Bristol boat fighter carriage. And then there was a lovely story. Eddie Mayer, the chief engineer, he was approached by the Admiralty, invited up to the Clyde estuary, because the Admiralty told him that the English submarine torpedoes were so slow that the Germans could get out of the net. So Eddie there went up, watched this torpedo go down, and said to the Admiralty spokesman, "I can't the torpedo to go faster than that. I don't deserve my job." So the Admiralty said, "Well, you produce a prototype. Let's bring it back here as soon as you've done it and see." Anyway, Eddie there produced an engine, and the torpedo just roared down the Clyde. And so Riley's got that order for war. And so they were in great demand. And then halfway through the war, my father got permission, I don't know how he did this, from the Board of Trade to take some draftsmen from the Board and building works to produce some new post-war armament. And the Board of Trade played right into his hands. They said, "Well, if you promise that this won't reduce your munitions work, we'll give you that permission." Well, of course, he said yes. And so Riley's, and I think the only genuine new post-war model everyone else produced was made in 1939. But Riley's had this model that became known later in life, it's an RM. In my father's day, it was always the 1.5 and 2.5. And they was beautiful cars. The orders were just enormous. I remember my father's phone never stopped ringing in the evenings. Up to 10 o'clock at night, people were ringing him to jump a queue. And you had to write all about that and on to it and so on, and trying to jump the queue. And it was very difficult for him. But one thing that I thought was interesting, the chief body engineer of General Motors Detroit, a few years ago, was asked by an American car magazine what, in his opinion, was the perfect car that had been made in the world. And to his astonishment, this chief body engineer of General Motors Detroit said the post-war Riley, which wasn't the answer this interviewer was expecting. He said, "Why on earth?" He said, "You go away and study that car. If I was just given 2 words, I'd say sporting elegance." He said, "It's a beautifully designed car." And so that was a great success. But then, of course, BMC came along, and so you had the merger of Austin and the Nuffield Group. And then BMC badge engineering got underway. And gradually, the Riley image of sporting elegance was sort of overcome by this badge engineering where you have a body and you just stick an Austin Morris towards the edge of Riley grill on it. And that really destroyed Riley because my father had a slogan, which I always thought was quite clever. He said to me, "The Rileys we made with the discerning buyer." I thought that was, must have given a lot of thought to using that expression, but it just probably made the Riley owner just feel that a little bit different. And but badge engineering sort of destroyed that. And so in 1969, BMC scrapped Riley production. But the name lives on through Riley clubs all over the world, and they all are thriving. Mike Hawthorne flew the flag for considerable time. He started on the Riley Inn, then a Riley Sprite. Did 19 races in those two cars, and was in the first three in all 19 races. So that kept the Riley name flying. And then the name is the 1.5, the successful on the production part championship, on the Circuit of Ireland rally, and so on. But then the Cortina knocked that car out correctly, and BMC wouldn't develop it as some of the drivers have been asking them to do, and so the end came. And then if I jump to later times, back in 2017, it's a group of us were sort of talking one day, and we suddenly said, why don't we open the Riley Archive? And one of us said, why don't we have a slogan, Riley returns to Coventry? And so we got Unit 8 in Coventry Canal Basin. The Riley Cars Archive Heritage Trust has been formed, and the aim is to leave a lasting legacy for the people of Coventry. We've got two arms, one digitising, where anyone in the world can download any query they've got on Riley's, and the other one is where people coming into the Canal Basin can get off their narrowboat, walk in and see us, or people can come from anywhere in the UK to visit us. And this is just a full flavour of what you've got in the archive. And any of you would be very welcome to visit us. We're open Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 12 to 3. Best to ring before, just in case someone's ill or not open. Our great need is volunteers. And if you like, if you'd like to become a volunteer, you'll be warmly welcomed. But that's where we've reached today. We've got the replica of the 1896, 1898 Riley in the archive, along with the 1903 Riley bicycle. There are only two Riley bicycles known to still exist, one in Australia and one's in the archive. And we've just started work on a Riley replica engine for the Riley replica car. The car sitting in the archive got no engine. This is going to be a very tough proposition. There are only two photographs to go on, so we've got to do some intelligent guesswork. But we're hoping 2 years from now, when it's the centenary of the Riley Motor Club, to have the replica engine in the replica car, and maybe we can, on private ground, drive around in it. The latest development in the archive are school visits, and we're having primary schools. Had the first two come, the children will be just absolutely fascinated by the replica and queue up to get on it and sit on it and pretend they're driving it. So that brings you up right up to today. Thank you very much.
Victor, Michael Riley, who's member of the campus, so I'd just like to chat to you about the trust.
Yeah. Well, Victor's told you everything really. But presently, we now open at daily, Tuesday to Saturday, from 10 till 3, and we do manage most of them. We've only got 5 volunteers at the moment. One is your. And between us, we're managing to cover it on occasions, like Saturday ago, last Saturday, we had to put a sign saying you can't do it. But we're always looking for volunteers and anyone in that frame of mind. And it's more of a social event. Well, I mean, come along. It's really a meet and greet thing for anyone who arrives at the Canal Basin. I don't know if you've all been to the Canal Basin, but it's really good. And we've got a good food offer. There's a Portuguese cafe next to us, excellent food. Playwrights used to be by the cathedral. They're there now. And you're all welcome any point to come on. You've all got a leaflet, and the details on the back of there, the website, phone number, which takes you to the unit, and you may well add about 4 hours to leave a message. Just to check or just say, yeah, we're coming along. But please come along, it's such an interesting story. And this is just a display board we've got. We've got a cabinet, which is full of trophies from those days, the Le Mans. And there's a medal of your mothers from there. We've got a display which we've acquired recently. Victor's mentioned the bicycle, which how we got that, it's unbelievable. There's only 2 left in the world, what we know of. And like you say, Melbourne, Australia have got one, and we were lucky to get the other one. And a local charity funded. We had to do a deal with the chap who passed away, his widow, which was quite a simple sum, but this local charity funded it for us, so that's now ours. We are in the throes, which will really boost us. We're going for a lottery grant at the moment. We had some good help from the gentleman who works for the council. That will put us on the feet for another 2 years. And we have had offers of a Riley motorcycle, which is one of two in the world. Later on in the year, very expensive, and we're hoping we can get funding somewhere. It has been included in the lottery grant as an exhibit, whether we get that or not. And there's also a 4-wheel car. What year is that?
1906.
And we don't know where they are going to put that. It's only a unit, but we'll hope someone will host the Commonwealth Museum if we get it. Again, it's all depends on our grants. But no, I mean, is there any questions you want to ask me or Victor? Please ask.
If I can just echo what Mike and Richard said, visiting Coventry Canal Basin is essential for everyone because it's such a fascinating site. Really, you know, it's in the midst of post-war Coventry, and it's highly recommended. And the Players Cafe served me an excellent tuna baguette this week, actually. I was in the research for this evening. But I'm sure that there'll be questions for Victor, having given us an absolutely fascinating story. This guy is, your mum is saying that he's 86. Oh, 88. I'm just remembering. Open to the floor. It's open to the online audience as well. Anybody like to pose a question to Victor about this result?
I know I'm there. I should know the answer to this one. But Victor, that proposed liaison between Riley's and BMW. When was that exactly?
Yes. Thank you, Peter. I never mentioned that. What happened? Orpington, or Bruce and Ash, was approached by BMW to make BMWs under license and start to sell into the UK market. But Orpington Sprague and Ash factory in Middlesex didn't have any capacity to make any extra cars. But he said that the chairman of BMW, I know who could do it for you, and that's Riley's Coventry. So my father went over to see Hempel in 1936. They got on well. Their pop wasn't a Nazi, he was a Roman Catholic, and so there was no problem there. And then BMW came over to Riley Coventry, my father drove them round. And then my father did a reciprocal visit, going round the Munich factory, everything appeared to be going well. When he got to the shop where there was German forbidden entry. So my father said to him, well, what's in there? And he knew as soon as he asked a question, looking at faces of the BMW directors, that there was a problem. And they sort of shifting uneasily. And he said eventually, we'll have to ask Hitler's permission. My mother said, he realised immediately then that the deal was off, because I think what would have happened, they might have done a merger, because what my father had felt, the BMW came from nowhere and won the Alpine Trial the year after Riley's win. My father was so staggered, he had a good look at the BMW. They've got a much lighter chassis, but they haven't got any engine to equal the Sprite. And so the plan that was taking shape to him and Head Pop was the BMW chassis, Riley Sprite engine, and then a line in Coventry, a line in Munich, and bodies would be put on by the two companies. My father reckoned that would be a very, very saleable car. But of course, when this embarrassment occurred, he realised everything was off. So he came back to England and he wrote a memo to the English government describing the incident. And he ended up the last paragraph. I can't tell you when war is coming, but I can tell you war is coming. One of our members is trying under the Freedom of Information Act to see if the Home Office can find that memo. It could have been destroyed in the war, but it would be fascinating if it could come to light. So, Peter, that's the story of that. It nearly came off, but just the last hurdle, really. And of course, my father then discovered after the war that that forbidden entry was was an engine for one of the German fighters, I think.
Am I right that BMW owned the Riley name?
Yes, they do. Yes, because when they bought Rover out of British Aerospace in sort of 1990, 1991-ish, they had all the British Leyland brand names. They only kept two, Triumph and Riley. The rest they weren't interested in. They didn't see any value in those brand names like Austin Morris and so on. And then when we had the Riley centenary in 1996, centenary of the 1896 formation of the Riley Cycle Company Limited, we invited Herr Pischetsrieder, the chairman of BMW, over. Because in his press conference, he talked quite excitedly about Riley. And we thought, ooh. But he couldn't come when he got a BMW rally the same weekend. So I sent him a video of the weekend. Immediately, by return came a letter. If you ever hold anything like this, invite me and I'll be there. But of course, you think, you can't have two centenaries. Right. Gaydon persuaded me to have a centenary of the completion of the first Riley car in 1898. And so in 1998, we had another centenary. Pischetsrieder came, and in his dinner speech, he announced a new Riley. Well, the room went absolutely bananas, cheering and shouting and screaming and knows what. And he said the prototype would be finished in a year. He and I would look at it, and then we would take it to every European motor show. If the feedback was good, production would start. Sadly, Mrs. Quant, the widow who owns 49% of BMW, sacked him, and the Riley prototype was nearly finished. His successor, who lectured in automotive engineering at Munich University, wasn't interested and stopped the project. So, but as you say, BMW still owned the brand, but I think probably the return of the brand now with electric cars and everything probably gone. You never know.
Any other questions?
No question. I just said my father and grandfather were both Riley. And my father raced for them in the 30s. And he actually won the Monte Carlo Rally in 1934, but in a Triumph Glory.
What was there? What was the name?
Jack Ridley.
Oh, right, and it was Captain Ridley who
That's right, yes,
redid
my grandfather.
the works. Yes, taking us from the side down into the line.
Yeah.
So it was his son who drove Riley's in the Alpine.
He drove the Alpine. He won the Monte Carlo Rally in a Triumph Glory.
But he was in the winning team at the Alpine in the Riley.
Yes, he did, yes.
Yes. Well, that's fascinating. And you're the granddaughter?
I'm granddaughter of Captain Ridley, yes.
Ah.
Very good to have you here this evening.
That's very interesting. Thank you.
Martin.
I don't know if you could say anything about the engineering personnel, but I can cast a little bit of light on the subject. I was an apprentice at the Humber, started off in the military vehicle design office, went around the works, and I finished back in the military vehicle design office. The chief engineer changed, was an ex-Riley man, Herbert Dickinson. He was a first-class engineer, but a very tough taskmaster. A whole string of my fellow apprentices came through his small office and couldn't stand the heat of it. I stood it for quite a while. There was one bloke, he was much younger, but experienced, ex-Armstrong silly man. He needed a gold medal for endurance, sticking up in that office.
What year was that?
That was late 50s.
Late 50s, right.
I didn't know anything about where this chap came from. I thought he was ex-Riley. Military vehicle was very heavy, strong vehicle, nothing like any Riley car.
Yes. Because Riley were moved by enough years from Coventry, Durbar Avenue, to Abingdon in 1948. So you came a bit after that.
But regarding your comment about batch engineering, true, it was very rife in that period, particularly in the British Land Group.
Yes.
But in reality, the sporting brands, being the Triumph and the Emperor, as well as Friday, did have upgraded power in their engines and stiffened suspension and different trim, different radiator drill. So it was batch engineering on a basic design of the car.
Yes.
But there were substantial differences that made them more sporting cars.
Yes. And the 1.5, when that came out and started to do well in motorsport, radio aficionados began to think, gosh, BMC began to take the mark back to its glory days. And I suppose BMC was short of money, and I was always told by Ford that the Mini should have been priced at £30 above the price it was sold at. So the BMC lost money on every Mini, 6,000 a week. Well, that was a management error, I think.
The Raleigh 1.5 was based on a very modest body shell. It was the Morris Minor.
Morris Minor, that one, yes.
In fact, I considered buying one at one point, but being a roots man, I intentionally moved instead.
Richard.
Did Riley ever consider producing like commercial vans and everything? It seems to me they were a luxury brand, and they stayed there. And nice before the expensive brands have all been taken over. They've gone, Alvis and all that. They've all gone. That's the reason that they didn't diversify.
They didn't understand. What nearly happened, Uncle Ted, we used to call him, that was Cecil Riley, the youngest of grandfather's 5 sons, he was in World War One, and he started in the trenches. Didn't like that much. Volunteered to ride a motorbike up and down the line. Didn't like that much with German snipers, and volunteered for the Royal Flying Corps, predecessor of the RAF. Thought he'd be safer up in the sky until he got shot down. Broke every bone. Was 6 months in hospital. Took an interest in flying on Coventry Flying Club. Tried to persuade my father to add aircraft production to car production. And my father very nearly bought it. He even went so far as to form the Riley Aircraft Limited as a company name. Because Tep reckoned he could make a plane at the same price as making a Riley line car. He couldn't quite push my father over the edge into production. So that's as near as they came to some other product.
Yes. Can you give us some idea of the volumes of how many cars were made? And were they always sold, I believe in the early days of the motor industry, people wanted a rolling chassis that didn't weigh a complete car? Could you sort of complete car?
Yes, I mean, people did come to the works, and in some cases took a rolling chassis away with them and had it bodied somewhere else, like miners. But I mean, the Riley 9 production reached 100 a week. That was probably the highest of any model, except after the war, the 1.5, they made 30,000 of those, and the Riley Elf, they made 30,000. I mean, I'm biased, I know, but I always thought the Riley Elf was the best looking mini made. And I thought the Riley grill was molded into the front beautifully. And it looked just that little bit different from all the other minis.
Now, how many years were they making the Riley 9?
They made the Riley 9, got going in 1928, and 1937 was about the end. And what really happened, what Percy designed as a very, very fine performance car, because Riley's kept adding refinements, the car got heavier, and really, it was so slow at the end that it couldn't get out of its own way. But they should have done something about the engine to offset this weight increase. That was a mistake, really, that the man made, I think, with benefit of hindsight.
Chris?
Yes, back in the 50s, my brother had a Riley with a pre-selected gearbox. Can you say anything about that?
Yes, well, that would have been a pre-war, right?
Yes, it was.
Do you know what model that was?
Not certainly, not with any certainty.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, could have been a Lynx.
How did they go? I mean, I know what they were, but were they successful? Because certainly his was not particularly successful. I think it was rather old.
Right, right.
Yes.
Right. No, funny enough, when Bishop Streeter came over the second centenary, I asked him if we could use the Rover test track, which had been an airfield in World War II, to have a show of sporting riders on the Sunday. It's the same day as the Silverstone Grand Prix, which he was going on in his helicopter that and spending Saturday with us. And he said yes, but on one condition. Under the World War II control tower, I want a Riley Brooklands, a white Riley, and a Riley with a pre-selector.
Yeah. So were they popular? How popular were they?
Very.
Right.
It was just a lovely mechanism.
Yeah.
And so he drove all those 3 round the track. Had a smile from ear to ear.
Yeah. So this was an alternative thing you could have on some models if you wished it.
Yes,
Yes.
you could choose.
Yes.
But it became very, very popular.
Wilson.
That's right, because there was a choice, EMB Wilson
Yes.
or Armstrong Siddeley.
Right.
Yes.
Now, what was the price of the Riding 9? What's the price?
of Riding 9.
About £300, I think.
300.
Yes.
That was quite pricey.
It was. But this is why my father used this slogan, "Ride is for the discerning buyer."
Yeah.
But it was pricey, and that was because Percy built enormous quality into the car. And when some people say to me, such as at the Leamington Spa Rally at Whittle Grange back in June this year, there must have been over 100 riders there that day. A lot of people say to me, "Gosh, they're lasting very well." He said, "Well, Percy wouldn't have been at all surprised because he had the saying. He used to say to the father again and again, 'It's got to be a proper job, Victor.'" And so there was quality, possibly over-engineering built into it. So it was a bit pricey, but they're around today. And the VSCC tells me, if it wasn't for Riley, there wouldn't be a VSCC club. They have to thank Riley's for all their race meetings, for the majority brand is Riley. So Percy would be delighted, but he wouldn't be surprised.
Very good.
I'm not an expert at all, as many of you know, in car world. And I suspect a lot of petrol heads out there this evening. But what interests me a little bit is there seem to be a sort of a multiple car enthusiast bodies. So, for example, you've got the Riley Motor Club, Riley Register, and the Archive. I mean, this is an amicable liaison, is this?
Yes, it is. And we've also got the Riley RM people.
Yeah.
For the postal
ones, yeah.
You see, what happened, I suppose if my father had been younger, but when the register was formed in 1954, he was already dying, really.
Yeah.
And Arnold Farrelly, when he went from Secretary and Treasury, came to me and said, "There's a move to create a Riding 9 club." It's then expanded to pre-war riders. But my father was too frail to have the energy to grasp the nettle. I think if he'd been 10 years younger, he would have, because the pre-war riding owners' right was that riding owner wasn't interested in spares. They were only interested in helping to sell the current model. But I think if my father had been younger, he'd have recognised the need. I would have got behind that, and then probably there wouldn't have been a Riley register.
Yeah.
But he was too old and frail, I think, to get involved. But as you saw yourself, at Woodhall Great in June, it was a joint Riley Club Riley Register rally. That was the second year this year. We've already booked for next year. And so I think collaboration now is on the increase, and who knows, we might all come back together again in the future, because there's a shrinking pool of talent as we all get older. We have to get over the next one.
Your grandfather would be very pleased, wouldn't he?
Any questions online, Lisa?
This is an invitation to participants who are online. Don't forget to unmute yourself. I don't see any questions being asked at this stage.
Okay.
No, thank you, Martin.
Here's your chance. Any final questions for Victor?
Unfortunately, manufacturers not terribly associated with motorsport these days. But I don't know, but in those days they were interested because to prove the durability of the car. Or not everybody wanted to buy a ride to go and race it, did they?
No, but the motorsport success improved the breed. No doubt about it.
Yeah.
And my father set great store by motorsport to improve. Coventry City Council, they were very interested, and they began to realise that when riders had a success at Portland or the Mall, the Alpine Trial, that brought Coventry on the map. And so what Coventry City Council started to do, when riders returned from the European race, we'd done well, they would give a lunch or a dinner for the riding drivers, the riding mechanics, and the riding management. And this became a regular feature. And I always thought that
Could I ask, has anybody written down your memories at all? If not, they're going on and do it. Because it's actually fascinating stuff.
Yeah, I must admit, when we go out and start, I'll get the phone out, I've got a recording app, and I'll slap it in front of him, and I've got so many spoils now. And I'm doing the viewing or whatever. I didn't do it tonight, but I thought you were recording one. So,
It's a perfect opportunity for a group of volunteers to interview and take down. You know, it's priceless. Priceless. And okay,